afternoon. We will resume with our program after the opening session and the subsequent two sessions. We will continue with our third session, and we have a connection with the United States. The session will be chaired by esteemed Cemal Nur Sargut. If we could please have you on stage. Professor Dr. James Morris will be presenting his article. We will also have Professor Dr. Bruce Lawrence and Professor Dr. Miriam Cook live from the United States. In order to establish the connection and to assist us with the presentation, we will have Mr. Can Güzel at the session from Üsküdar University. The floor is yours, please.
If I'm only with you, then the people of blasphemy will just watch me. If I'm only with him, then the people of light will be honored by me. I am actually such a mixture of honey and vinegar, and I become a remedy for all kinds of illnesses. That's what Rumi says about the Prophet. Sirke and Jubin, the mixture of honey and vinegar, is actually the cure of all illness. As Mevlana says, all the mutasawwif come together, and if all the books are read for the religion, they would actually not suffice to be able to explain even one word of the Prophet. If we don't have Kamil insans like Mevlana, how would we know the meaning of the Prophet? Ferideddin Attar, when talks about those Joseph, Yusuf and Züleyha, he says, Yusuf rides on his horse. He was the sultan of his country, riding his horse in the streets of the city, and Züleyha has gotten elder because of the love for him, and she was sitting all by herself watching Yusuf go by, and Züleyha sighed in such a way that the womb in the hands of Joseph got fire, and then Joseph got rid of that womb through the womb. And Züleyha said to Allah, "Oh Allah, he is such a great prophet. I'm a very weak, simple woman. The fire of that ahsa in my heart is so strong that even the prophet cannot carry in his hands." When Mevlana tells us the story through Attar's language, he said that if we don't have the lovers, who would actually know the value of the beloved? If we don't have Mevlanas, who would know the value of the Prophet? If we don't have the Prophet, who would know the power and the meaning of Allah Almighty? So through such a perspective, I would like to express my gratitude to the owner of Konya. They have been settled in the center of our heart, and as they say so, their tomb is not actually here physically, but in the heart of all the lovers. May Allah bestow Mevlana's love upon our heart, inshallah. My beloved friend Miriam and Bruce will take the floor now. They both actually have a great place in my life. The great effort they showed in Duke University in North Carolina, and the struggle and the endeavors they had for Islamophobia after 9/11. their encouragement and actually putting into the curriculum of the university for the students to read Carl's book on the Quran. Thank you very much. And I'd like to give the floor to Can Güzel, who is a very close friend of theirs. Professor Dr. Bruce Lawrence is one of the professors of the most distinguished university, Duke University at Islamic Center for Studies. He has actually done his in Harvard, his MA, and he started to learn Urdu, Arabic at a very early age. His research area is Islamic studies, Quran Kelime bibliography. That's the name of his work that has given him a DOST award. I would like to share with you something about Bruce. When I was in the States, I lived there for 12 years. The first time at Duke University in 2005, when I was giving the Islamic Civilizations, when he was giving the Islamic Civilizations course, he actually asked me to offer this course, and the smiling face of Islam was shown as a part of the course in an exhibition of calligraphy. And after a trauma, a very serious trauma that Bruce and Miriam went through, he said this following to me: you know what, the most favorable name, attribute of God is Zülcelali vel Ikram, because there is always an offering after each and every trouble offered, bestowed by God. When he was actually in bed, when I came in the hospital, he said, "Oh, was it you who came? I was reading the most favorable Quran surah of mine, the Dua surah." Miriam Cook, the Professor Bruce Lawrence's wife, also works at the same institution, Duke University, has been working as the head of the Middle East Studies, and she is specialized in Arabic studies and Arabic language, especially the role of women. And she is the editor of Middle Eastern Women's Studies Journal. Now it's very early there in the United States, 6:30 a.m. Let's have the floor for Bruce Lawrence. Please, Bruce Lawrence.
Hello, greetings from North Carolina. I'm very happy to be here.
Merhabalar, sizinle beraber olduğum için çok memnunum. Böyle bir konferansın bir parçası olmaktan dolayı çok memnuniyet duyuyorum. Can Güzel'i ve Fahir'e dedim ki belki Skype'la zımnen, virtüel online olarak sizle bağlantı kurabilirim. Fiziksel olarak sizle olmasam da sizle
on the body and the spirit today, and I titled my talk Quranic Spirituality. Quranic spirituality is both ontology and practice. The full version of what I've written is available in the wonderful DOST conference book that others have edited, and I will briefly now say something about what I consider the core of it, and that is the Asma al-Husna, the beautiful divine names. The divine names are themselves vehicles to understanding the divine within us. In the Quran, they're labeled as His most beautiful names. وَلِلَّهِ الْأَسْمَاءُ الْحُسْنَى فَأَدْعُوهُ بِهَا. For God's are the most beautiful names, so call Him by them. But not all the divine names are beautiful, at least by human standards. Some are majestic or severe, like Al-Muntaqim, God is the punisher, or Mudil, the avenger, or Qabid, the restrainer, or Mumit, the one who commands death. Ibn Arabi, whom I will not fully address today because Jim Morris is there with you, and he will say much more and can say much more about Ibn Arabi than I can. But Ibn Arabi, Sheikh al-Akbar, does not flinch from seeing the full spectrum of the Asma al-Husna as the treasure given to the servant, to us, the human creature, as acknowledgement of God. They're an invitation to return to our origins, to know our true self. But it is only some of us, those who are known as the deeply sincere ones, those who have achieved insight and persisted with patience, those who are known as saints or the arrived ones. It is they who tell us the insight and the depth of insight about the Asma al-Husna. For while saints, like the rest of us, make the spiritual journey from a point of everyday existence, they journey within God, as did the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And this journey is always charted through the Quran, itself the map to the source and to its many names. While Ibn Arabi's reflection is visionary, at once grand and lofty, it is Kanan Rifai who has demonstrated how the names, the Asma al-Husna, and the qualities they embody become reflected in human experience. The observation of Kanan Rifai is framed, as all of you know, in a commentary that he wrote on Mevlana's Masnavi. And I was particularly taken with the story of the grocer and the parrot, and how the parrot spilled oil in the shop. Kanan Rifai talks about this and probes the depths of that process by which, through this story, the human being perceives his or her bodily awareness and begin to understand, in his words, how the manifestation and self-disclosure of God's names and attributes, both the Asma and the Sifat, are not the same in every human being. They are various, and it occurs in varying degrees. But he emphasizes there is always the divinely decreed tension performed by the veil of the heart. And I'm going to accent in what I say today this phrase from Kanan Rifai, the veil of the heart. Again, to quote him, the sublime feeling and the base feelings in the human body are like sweet and salt seas, and what separates them is the veil of the heart. In other words, the veil of the heart functions as the barzakh, separating but also keeping in tandem with one another what seem to be opposites. Kanan Rifai himself goes on to explain, to put it in another way, the veil of the heart separates the divine light from the evil darkness in a person and does not let them mingle. I call this close combination without dissolution of separate elements barzakh logic. And here is the full passage from Kanan Rifai's commentary on the Masnavi of Mevlana, explaining how barzakh logic works. It does not destroy or dissolve, but keeps in tandem two disparate forces. Again, from Kanan Rifai, who speaks better than I can paraphrase, in what follows. Because while God was hidden like a treasure in his own realm of mystery, the elements of goodness, beauty, and being in his divine nature were freed from this hiding and turned towards showing themselves in the realm of creation. Such a manifestation, such a self-disclosure, felt the need for a vehicle capable of comprehending that being, that goodness, and especially that beauty. And so the human, all of us, have been created with the duty of comprehending that being and that beauty. But the manifestation, the self-disclosure of God's names and attributes, the Asma and the Sifat, is not the same in each of us. It is various, and it varies in varying degrees. That is why it is the duty of the arrived ones, the awliya, the saints, who comprehend that they have attained the reality of divine at its highest degree. It is their duty to awaken human spirits to divine qualities entrusted to them, and also to free us from the dark realm of our own souls. It is through that divine decree to free us from the dark realms of our own souls and its pervasive presence throughout history that Kanan Rafai can conclude, and again in his words, the purpose of these two forces, light and darkness, remain separate, but they remain separate by virtue of the heart's veil in the body. And their goal is to reach the same reality. That they appear to be opposites is not an obstacle to their being partners in function. And let me repeat, that last is so important for Barzakh logic. Even though light and darkness appear to be opposites, that is not an obstacle to their being partners in function. There could not be a clearer statement on how the divine mystery through Barzakh logic pervades the body with the spirit. It is epitomized as the heart's veil in the body, and it is this logic, Barzakh logic, that makes it possible for the arrived ones, the Awliya, the saints, to be emissaries for humankind of the Quranic message at the core of divine revelation. So briefly, I want to talk about 4 trajectories of Quranic spirituality, and to do it as adab or edeb. And following on the insight of Kanan Rafai, I think we can begin to understand how spirituality reflects a two-way process. This is a process where the Quran, or parts of the Quran, are used to enable and also protect the one who uses the Quran. But there's another process that directs the user to make of the Quran something spiritual beyond words, or the meaning of words, or even the unfoldment of words in a particular practice. These larger responses to the Quranic message fall under the rubric of adab, which might be defined as attention to a protocol of piety and hierarchy that allows each of us to become also the enhancer of that which we serve. So 4 channels of adab that relate to the Quran and related to Quranic Islamic spirituality are tajweed, recitation, khat, or calligraphy, such as the calligraphy you see behind me of the holy name Hu, the pronoun Hu, which refers to the one beyond all being, Allah Ta'ala, or to tafsir, or interpretation of the Quran, or tarjuman, translation of the Holy Quran. Because this is a conference and you all have been listening and pondering many observations today, I want to skip and not talk about tajweed or khat, but instead focus on tafsir and tarjuman in a few brief comments. Prior to translation, and closely related to it, is what is called the science of interpretation, or the science of hermeneutics. In the modern period, this is called emphasis to how the Quran has rhetorical and stylistic features that separate it, but also link it to other kinds of literature. There are 3 Egyptians, Amin al-Khuli, his wife and collaborator, Bint al-Shathi, and also more recently Nasser Hamad Abul Zaid, all of whom worked in understanding the Quran as an elevated kind of literature. And among their successors, all of whom rely on this kind of literary tafsir, are Indian, Iranian, Indonesian, and of course Turkish scholars. All of them honor the noble book as their source, but each pursues what is called tafsir bid'ah, that is interpreting divine revelation through the personal view of each, whatever the background, the language, and the outlook that he or she may have. In the deepest sense, I would like to suggest, Kanan Rafai is also Mufassir bid'ah. He embodies the approach using the Rumi's Masnavi, the Masnavi of the Mawlana, as his text of reference, and so he unfolds how the beauty of the Quran also requires silence. And again, it's ironic that I have to quote him to honor silence, but let me do so briefly. Again, from Kanan Rafai. Those who recite the gracious Quran in beautiful voices or sing the music pause. They pause in order to take a breath and thereby increase their voices and continue the music. And so he goes on, creation itself is a realm of opposites. White is brighter when set against black. light is more beautiful set against the shadow. And I might add that my talk is going to be better when set against the talk of my wife who will follow me and also talk about Barzakh. So the human eye sees God's light not with the white of the eye, but the black pupil of the eye. All except that reference to my wife was from Kanan Rafai. And so Edeb requires seeing the heart's veil in the body. The darkness and light appear to be opposites, yet, to quote Kanan Rafai once again, they appear to be opposites, but that is not an obstacle to their being partners in function. And so let me say briefly a word about how Barzakh and Barzakh logic applies through Edeb to the translation of the Holy Quran. Though many have challenged the permissibility, much less the wisdom, of translating the revealed Arabic into a pedestrian other language, whether that be medieval Arabic, medieval Latin, modern English, or even modern Turkish, there's nonetheless been the practice since at least the 8th century, beginning with the liturgical use of Persian by Mawali, or clients of the earliest Arab Muslims. It's always been the practice from the 8th century to include other languages with the Holy Quran. For instance, interlinear Persian renderings we can see already from the 9th century and has been studied in a book called The Vernacular Quran by Trafizadeh. And more recently, of course, there have been translations of the Quran into both Turkish and English. I would like to suggest that translation is itself a form of adab, an act of devotion to the word as revealed, remembered, and recited. In the 20th century, it was some from India who endeavored to make this happen. So their point was missionary, like Muhammad Ali of the Ahmadiyya movement. He saw in translation a chance to propagate his vision of Islam and to make it a global religion. There are others like Marmaduke Pickthall and Abdullah Yusuf Ali, who were closely connected to the British. Pickthall, for instance, was an English novelist, and then he became a convert to Islam who won support from the Nizam of Hyderabad. And many don't know this, but Abdullah Yusuf Ali was not a Sunni Muslim. He was a Dawoodi Bohra, or Ismaili, who, like Muhammad Iqbal, served in the British civil service. All their translations, but especially Yusuf Ali's, remain influential, oft-cited, and are widely read as renditions of the Holy Quran in English. Each strives to communicate a glimpse of the original revelation, but to do so in tone as well as in content. And this is the important point, that it's not just translation per se, it's translating the tone as well as the content of the Holy Quran, and translation with rhythm and resonance, not just with its equivalent or parallel meaning in wooden prose. Among others whom I could cite who followed this path to make the Quran sing, as it were, instead of just to be said in another language, among them is the American Buddhist poet Tom Cleary. In writing about the Quran, on which he spent several years, almost a decade of his life, in translating it, rendering it into modern English, he wrote, "It is also possible to make the Quran into readable, meditative English, so that reading or reciting the Quran in English will not be fast or glib, but measured and attentive, being in and of itself a spiritual exercise, and where possible," says Cleary about his own labor, "I've tried to borrow from the unusual diction of the original Arabic, for the effect this has on pace, attention, and psychological impact on the reader-listener." Limited neither to Arabs nor to Muslims, the Quranic message translated, whether medieval Persian, modern English, contemporary Turkish, the Quranic message translated expands its spiritual force, and so its legacy for humankind. No human language is fully divine. Arabic has first place in precedence because of the noble book delivered in that language. But all translators, whatever their host language, strive to mirror and so project the timeless message of the Holy Quran in vernacular tongues. We are touched by its beauty, but speechless before its otherness. Barzakh logic prevails, especially for those who understand and accept what Kanan Rafai has brilliantly depicted as the veil of the heart. Thank you very much.
I don't know if he can hear me. Thank you, Dr. Lawrence. Thank you very much, Dr. Lawrence. Hello, Miriam. Onlar beni duyabiliyorlar mı bilmiyorum. Kontrol.
I don't know if they can hear me. Our friends at the technical desk, we lost the connection. They don't hear us. Can you please write them that our beloved Cemal Nur Hoca thanks them? They have mesmerized me because they have told the issue with my Hoca Kenan Rifai Hazretleri. The core, the essence was the barzakh quality of Peygamber, the Prophet and the Quran. The language of the Quran is not important. The meaning in all languages in Quran is the same, and something that Kenan Rifai said really impresses me. He says, us, the Turkish Muslims, before we touch Quran, we do the ablution, and in that, after that, we kiss it and we put it above our heads. But in that Quran that we kiss, the Satan, the evil, the dark forces, and everything else is also included. But there is a need for them as well. So we take them all together in its entirety, in its wholeness, and we kiss them as such. This is called adab. Adab is us being inclined to hug in all the people, the hulk, the people, and knowing that everybody is appointed for that service. Yes, we shall fight the violent, but instead of trying to fight the violent, we don't do this, and we will do this without trying to punish the violator. We try to oppress the violence, and we know that God will give the punishment for all the violent people. Now, another dear friend of mine, if you already have the connection with Miriam, we're ready to listen to her. Barzakh in the writings of novelists.
Okay.
Tamam.
So today my paper examines the way and belonging in the gender for connection with Islam.
Konuşmak ilahi olanla bağlantısı için bu mistik deneyim ve özlemin
The mystical experience exceeds verbal expression, but without words, the spiritual experience remains dimly understood, difficult to repeat, and impossible to share. So how can it be communicated? Poetry seems best suited to the task of transmission and repetition. For in the prolonged hesitation between sound and sense, to use Paul Valéry's haunting phrase, the listener can pause or whisper away from the ineffable. In her analysis of Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi's poetry, Fatmik Kashawaraz captures the explicit elusiveness of the great Persian mystic's lyrics. She evokes his desire for silence, and I quote, "Silence that occupies a space that hides the unspoken, understood not as intermission within language, but a category outside it, a different aspect of experience that allows the Poetry seems most likely to bridge the gap between inner and outer experience, allowing readers to participate in the act of creation and to cross the gap that separates us from the freshness of the breeze, the innocence of the birds, and the vastness of the sea. Compressing rather than expanding the expression, poets can catch and relay fragments of experience, and they do so with little or no narrative. So how can novelists, whose art, after all, is narrative, communicate the spiritual experience? The challenges are thematic, formal, and epistemological. Narrative shapes the shapeless experience, and in so doing, it directs its reception from page to page, leaving little space for the poetic hesitation between sound and sense, charting the process of reaching beyond the physical to the metaphysical. Novelists invite readers to witness rather than to experience another's death to individual self, Fana. Formally, the novel often demands the kind of closure that stifles the existential longing for something profoundly different in kind, a doorway to the infinite, to eternity, to a forever opening up and expansion of vision. Marked by its secular history and its concerns, can the novel nonetheless articulate the spiritual experience? In what follows, I will try to answer this question, looking at 4 novels through Barzakh logic. And the 4 novels that I will treat very briefly are the Egyptian Gamal al-Ghitani's Mutun al-Ahram, that came out in 1909, the Libyan Ibrahim al-Kuni's Nazif al-Hajar of 1990, Jean-Marie Le Clézio's 1980 Desert, Sahara, and finally the American Irving Karchmar's 2012 Master of the Jinn. The Barzakh, I won't go into the definition since Bruce Lawrence has already done it, but I will be treating the Barzakh as the chronotope of Fana and Baqa, a transcendental experience in a special time and a special space of states in constant oscillation, dissolution of the self in the divine, Fana, and persistence in that state after returning to the material world, Baqa. Put together, the 2 words relate to stages and the progression of the soul from a nafs al-lawama to a nafs al-mutma'inna. The desert, Barzakh, contains the mystery and meaning of the experience of dissolution of the self to divine, in the divine, the space of the quest, the desert. It evokes fresh narrative from the deepest recesses of the literary and religious imagination. Spiritual quests require journeys beyond space and time, but also in a special space and in a special time. Such journeys, often in and across deserts, may involve metamorphoses, changing, shape-changing, intertwining humans with the non-human. In the Barzakh, linking and separating incongruous life forms, flash moments of mystical awareness and self-realization that blossom after death to the physical world. Novels of Islamic spirituality, the four that I have cited in particular, unlike poetry and, of course, visual representation, require the delineation of a physical setting. It is not enough to hint at the context and allow the reader of poetry, for example, to imagine where the intensity is situated. The place must be described. And in the case of these novels, the place is the desert. Starkly real, but also abstract in its apparent emptiness. The desert lends itself to vivid lyrical description. It is, to quote Ibrahim al-Kuni, a paradise of non-existence. For the body, the desert is a place of exile, whereas for the spirit, the desert is Jannah. Leclésio adds that the desert is a timeless land, removed from human history, at the pinnacle of earthly existence. It was as if there were no names here, as if there were no words, again the allusion to silence. The desert cleansed everything and its wind wiped everything away. The only, perhaps the last, free land. The land in which the laws of men no longer mattered. The great silence that swept constantly over the dunes was deep in their bodies, in their entrails. That was the true secret of Sir. In this paradise of silence, Jannat al-Sir, the laws of men no longer matter. So the two novels in which the desert plays the leading role are Ibrahim al-Kuni's Mazik al-Hajar and Leclésio's 1980 Desert. Set in early 20th century Libya and Morocco, during and after anti-colonial struggles, both novels trace the destiny of some Tuareg, the blue people of the Sahara, who are resisting the European colonizers. Emerging out of opposite ends of the Saharan desert, the Libyans fight the Italians and the Moroccans resist the French, to whom they refer as Christians. In the Libyan novel, the rebels remain in the shadows out of which unfolds the story of a jinn-like Muslim hermit called Assouf. In the French novel, Leclésio's, the mass movement of the blue men and women across vast stretches of the desert provide the focus for the historical section of the novel. Noor, a Tuareg fighter accompanying the legendary leader Mal Inain between 1909 and 1910, somewhere not far from Tiznit where he is buried, experiences the desert as a place of hardship, but importantly also magical, mystical encounters. The real and the imaginal, the human and the non-human, the visible and the invisible world of the jinn connect in the desert barzakh. All journeys required guides, who, often jinn-like, and in these novels they are very much presented as semi-jinn, change shape and make very difficult demands on their followers in order, of course, to test them. And above all, there are moments when the guide disappears. When the guide disappears, the individual must negotiate sacred space alone. Temptations must be resisted on the way to the heart of what is usually represented as intense light. Besides, was talking about the light and the darkness, this play between light and dark, the barzakh of that space where both are there and neither is there, plays throughout these four novels. Gamal al-Ghitani's seekers in Mutun al-Ahram feel that they must resist sleep because they fear that orgiastic dreams may derail the spiritual focus. During the journey, smells and sights change until, I quote, light is light and not light. This light that is light and not light illumines their barzakh state between waking and sleeping. Their barzakh state that is where they resist the threat of physical desire that, and again, to quote Ritani, erases everything. But of course, the question is, does this passionate love that erases everything not also indicate that there is a destruction of everything physical? If so, that points to fana. Burning, and they burn, the seekers in the ahram burn in the fire of the eternal energy, burning in a timeless present, beyond words, beyond space. The seekers there are reduced, and I quote, to something like ash and not like ash. Here, the satisfaction of physical desire provides a central metaphor for transcendence. Something like ash and not like ash is all that remains of the self in the ecstatic union with the self, the capital self, the divine, that follows the transformation of carnal lust into mystical love. The novel concludes at the peak, fana. The spiritual extinction echoes the parallel between the ishq majazi and the ishq haqiqi. The simultaneous experience of metaphorical and physical love produces the ecstasy of extinction in the divine beloved, fana, with its hope of baqa. This spiritual sensual parallel informs Lala's relationship with the Harkani, the jinn guide in the Plesios desert. The two of them, when together, fly so high that not a single sound can be heard, and then land so lightly nothing moves. He makes images, and I quote, appear in the air with only his gestures, his lips, with the light in his eyes. Every image that he makes appear comes at a time when you're least expecting it and most expecting it. When he takes her to a tunnel bathed in light without light, she crawls in after him on her belly through a space as tight as the passageway that the pyramid seekers had to cross, and where the atmosphere is essentially charged. Lala will give birth to a half-jinn child of the desert. Although the guide may seem to disappear, he remains invisibly present, and Ibn Arabi explains so eloquently how this disappearance functions. The spirit, he writes in the Futuhat Makkiyah, I quote, is able to escape from human sight by creating a shape in front of him, which he can use as a shield, and he will move it to a different place from where he is standing, unquote. Not knowing that the jinn guide is still there, if not visibly so, devotees may succumb to the worst of temptations. During a brief absence, Irving Karchmar's troop and master of the jinn disobey the guide's command not to approach a particular well. They throw down a burning piece of cloth just to check the depth of the well, and suddenly they find themselves engulfed in a mighty conflagration, in a mighty fire. So this fire, an ambiguous symbol of birth and destruction, that contains a pure energy that destroys or enlightens, rises up out of the flame, Balzebul, the jinn-like guide who has led them to the well, to its fiery furnace. But no sooner has he appeared as Balzebul than he returns to his previous shape. And in that previous shape, as their guide, he scolds them for having been disobedient. He then again returns to the fire again becomes Beelzebul. After witnessing the guide's metamorphosis, the hero escapes. And for 3 days, without water and food, he's wandering in the desert until some Tuareg find him and take him to Agadez. 2 women tend him in his delirium until the master appears, the master now in his returned form to the guide, to make sure that his disciple had learned that one who appears as a terrible jinn may actually be a worthy guide, even if, and I quote, of many names. Re-entering human time, the hero finds that his companions were not consumed in the fire of the well. They had not experienced anything out of the ordinary. It was he. He was the only one to have had the vision that had taken him out of his physical state. He'd not been gone for days, certainly not for weeks, but had been in a trance for a few hours. It seems that he had dreamt a dream, the barzakh of the desert, mediating the spiritual experience of urgent searching and the detachment of tawakkul, the core element of fana baqa. The guide, no longer in his Beelzebul guise, ends the journey with what he calls the mercy of hope. Hope of what? The hero asks him. Awareness of God, the guide responds. He has learned from the mercurial jinn guide that what he had thought was a journey for an object, Solomon's ring, had another purpose altogether. Its goal was in fact esoteric, an encounter, however brief, with the majesty of the divine. These novelists have explored transcendence through quest narratives that blur the line between outer and inner journeys, and between physical and metaphysical encounters in the barzakh of the desert. Unlike Christian spiritual stories that emphasize peaceful journeys to the stillness of the heart, these novels describe violent confrontations with powerful forces that lead to the destruction of the individual self in fana. They paint vivid images and tell gripping narratives about heroes caught in the quest for transcendence. Great winds tear through the air, fires incinerate some while leaving others untouched. Yet in each case, it is the journey and its intensity that count, and the destination, if reached, will be no more than a pause, a catalyst for yet another journey. These novels of Islamic spirituality refuse closure, and they point beyond the limits of what is known, providing hope and a moral compass in a rudderless world. Thank you very much.
Efendim, Miriam Cook edebiyatçı olduğu için
since she is a scholar of literature, she talked about how the literary experience reveals itself in tasawwuf, but this is mostly through poetic literature, but the prose, she claimed, had also a part in this. She has given some examples. She said we can learn through the poems, and she asked, are the novels a servant to the spiritual experience, and they open the door for that, and especially around the barzakh notion, she said she will question this notion in the framework of 4 novels, and she talked about novels finding heaven in nothingness, and also she said 2 of these novels were written against the European colonialists in their war of independence. It reflects the experience of people, and that love surpasses
everything, and it calls for burning. Burning is an experience beyond words, and if there is only a bit of ash, then that is the remnants of the nafs, and you have to rid yourself of those, and you can live the aşk-ı hakiki, she said. Talked about Ibn Arabi explains Barzakh as well, and the talibs, the demanding ones, should come to the station of the murshid with their faults and mistakes, and murshid, the guide, is sine qua non and indispensable. So I shall now give the word to the true murshid. Yes, it was actually a very good commentary. In the Barzakh notion, Hazreti Muhammed Peygamber Efendimiz is the true Barzakh, keeps the Halk and Haq, God and the people. He is the mightiest power. Everybody watches his truth in him. This was told yesterday, this story. Abu Jahl looks at Peygamber and says, what an ugly creature, and Hazreti Ali said, what a beauty you are, and everybody said, they said different things, and you said you're both wrong. How? Because everybody, Abu Bakr said, how can you say you're both right to the two people? Because I'm just a mere reflection to everybody's perception, and their bodies are like mountains, and Allah says, I kept the world in balance with those mountains. In their truth, there is no concept like one way. It's always two ways: beauty, ugliness, good, bad, and everything. Merkez Efendi is a very good example of this, and he said, if one bad goes from the world, I pray for a good to come, or for the ugly ones, I would pray for the beauty to come back, because they all keep the balance.
That's the comprehension of center. Everybody has got a function here, with the good, with the evil, and this world is a wonder, because this universe is just a small reflection of this wonderful prophet, because out of this wonderful prophet wonders have been manifest. Fena means reaching the infinity, and that's the highest level in Islam. And Beka starts from here. Beka means coming back to earth, to the world with Allah, and serve people. And the Prophet actually established this Ismus Barzakh in between the two. Hem in Fena, in love with him, and in Beka finds his way with him, and may Allah not separate us from his path. And with your permission, I would like to now, a great lover, James Morris, I'm turning to. I'm actually calling him a great scholar and a great lover. May Allah, inshallah, make us understand this meaning.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. When you said that about the ashik at the end,
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim.
Magic, but at any rate, Konya has to be one of the few places on earth where you hear ashk ol sun all the time. It's hidden everywhere else, but in Konya you can get away with it. So I love coming here. Okay, so quite a few preludes to the actual talk or paper I put together here. First of all, it's about 1/10 of the actual paper that I have time, just the beginning and end here. I hope they'll soon put up the painting that it greets you as you come into the shrine of Mevlana, and that's what I'll be talking about or using as the framework. But I wanted to say, first of all, that in the larger paper, and I gave, I guess it's going to be translated into Turkish very soon, and if you can't get your hands through the group here on the English copy of the whole paper, write me and I'll be glad to send you the link to the Digital Collections website at Boston College. First of all, the point of the paper is to really focus on the universality of this phenomena or process of wilaya and walaya. And I mean true universality. And so it's not an argument, it's actually, as Rumi proceeds, a series of illuminations or just mentions of things that each reader, no matter what their culture, time, whatever, background, religion, they can find the presence of wilaya and then begin to build on that. Rumi does that so beautifully, but this is a much more prosaic, but also perhaps more directly accessible paper on that topic. There are three things that I think I'm hoping it will help us to understand or get past when I speak of universality. And really, it's all summed up in, if you've been around Konya the last day or two, this poster that actually appears in other places too. But Rumi's saying, you know, we didn't come to separate people, we came to unite them. And that's what walaya is really all about. But you'll also notice, and I think it doesn't matter where you grow up and what time or culture again, that they're people speaking of my wali is something that's often very closed and not acceptable to outsiders. In America, you would think of people who say Jesus saves, or Imam Ali saves, or Krishna saves, or whoever. So people, their very attachment to walaya, if we start with those who are considered awliyaullah by this or that religion and culture, it's often something that even cuts off not only outsiders, but also many people on the inside who can only approach that love through words or through concepts or through cultural norms, but they don't really have that dardadeen, that actual experience of ishq and of walaya. So I'm hoping this paper will help to kind of open the door to experiencing, understanding what walaya is about for people who haven't kind of gone beyond that first doorway of ilm about it, but not the actual experience. And that reminds me, when I was writing this, it kind of corresponds to the different stages, since in an imagination we're going through the shrine or just approaching the shrine here in Konya. It goes through the different stages that are outlined in the Surat At-Takathur, where it begins, Al-Hakum Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Al-Hakum At-Takathur Hatta Zurtum al-Maqabir. And of course, depending on where one finds oneself in the world of these different worlds that we've seen mentioned, that visiting the tombs may be coming into life in this world, or it may be those moments where we actually move beyond the graves, die before you die. When we have that kind of death, it's a rebirth to a higher world. But in any case, as a pilgrim, the sort of paper is structured according to those, the remainder of that surah, ilm al-yaqeen, sort of outside knowledge of walaya, ayn al-yaqeen, of actually seeing it, beginning to experience, and haqq al-yaqeen, of assimilating it and realizing the whole of walaya. So only part of that is in what I can explain today. So the title, Seeking God's Face, Discovering the Dance of Walaya and Walaya. I kind of, to evoke the cosmic and universal nature of this process, I start here with three bits of surahs, not the whole ayah, because you can go and look up the rest of it, where the walaya root is very important. You might say it's the Quran's introduction to the divine musician, the divine composer, the dancers, and the music that draws them all together, all very familiar Mevlevi images. But let me just say them in English, and then I'll come back briefly with the Arabic. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So the first is the verb. And God's is a place of shining forth and a place of darkening. So wherever you all turn around, then there is the face of God. Not wherever you turn, tawalu. So the walaya root is the word of turning around here. It's that sense. Now for the sort of the one who introduces the awliyaullah, the ayah that begins, for God will bring a people whom he loves, and they love him. And then it goes on, and actually this is the sort of locus classicus of the mention of the awliyaullah, the friends of God, the beloveds of God in the Quran. And finally the action and the real behind the scenes, the guide and the performer of all of this. God is the wali of those who have faith. He brings them forth from the shadows to the light. So in order again, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, وَلِلَّهِ الْمَشْرِقِ وَالْمَغْرِبِ فَأَيْنَمَا تُوَلُّوا فَثَمَّ وَجْهُ اللَّهِ. And سَيَأْتِي اللَّهُ بِقَوْمٍ, a people, a tribe, yuhibbuhum, yuhibbunahu. And finally, the third, Allahu waliyalladhina amanu yukhrijuhum min adh-dhulumati ila an-nur. So you can kind of just meditate on those ayahs and you'll get to the same place I hope this paper helps us to get to. So in the Islamic humanities, if we can, we're not going to be able to have the picture. Well, at some point, maybe you can introduce the translation after I've talked about the calligraphy and come back to it, or flash it now and then. Yeah, there. So in the Islamic humanities, too, pictures can sometimes be worth thousands of words. Certainly this is true of the monumental calligraphic composition that immediately greets each pilgrim as they first enter the shrine of Mevlana Rumi. For that relatively simple image, apparently simple image, provides nothing less than a sort of mandala, a comprehensive, multidimensional reminder of the essentials of the human condition in this world and beyond. So once we begin to actively contemplate its lessons and meanings, it can be a powerfully dynamic instrument for spiritual reflection and recollection for dhikrullah. To begin with the bold, black, most immediately visible foreground of this image, what must immediately strike every visitor, even without any language, is the stylized image of an obviously symbolic face, an image that for most visitors would immediately evoke the central Quranic image of the divine face, Wajhullah, as the manifest noble dimensions of the divine in all creation, and the repeated Quranic emphasis on our responsibility for seeking that face, ibtigha wajhullah. Indeed, that profound inner seeking and longing could well be taken for granted on the part of each new visitor who had already journeyed so long and so far for this closer visit with the spirit of Rumi and his close family and successors, whose memorials are aligned just below and beyond this calligraphy in the visit to the shrine. At the next level, for those with even a little Arabic or Persian, this mysteriously open face dissolves into a mirrored set of two intertwined prayers to God in the familiar form of litanies of dhikr and supplication, calling upon God through two divine names included in all the traditional hadith enumerations of the most beautiful names, namely Ya Wali, O Wali, God is, Ya Wali, I'm sorry, we'll get used to these words. They sound a lot like, and they're complete complementaries or contraries almost. God is the one who governs, manifests, manages, and directs all of creation. And Ya Wali, that is God, is the friend, guide, helper, support, beloved. In the Persian mystical poetry of Rumi and his litany songs of the Sufi tariqas in Turkish and many other Islamic languages, this second divine name, Al-Wali, is translated above all as the Dust or Yar, the divine beloved in all of his or her infinite and infinitely precious manifestations. In the Persian calligraphy here, I say Persian because you can see it is in Rumi's language, these two complementary, if often apparently opposed divine names or qualities are distinguished only by the central vertical letter Alif, I'll just up down, of Wali, which is here dramatically intertwined with the letter Lam, or backwards, shared by both the names, the Alif being what is unique to Wali. The Alif traditionally reflects the creative act and intrinsic connection of God with all levels of creation, while in contrast to that verticality, that spiritual immediacy, the form of the letter Lam by itself clearly suggests the beginning of the cosmic process of return to God that is the inherent purpose of the human condition. Indeed, from the earliest Islamic times, the distinctive calligraphic embrace of these two letters, the Lam Alif, has symbolized the all-encompassing love relationships linking the divine and each human soul. Finally, the ligature of the Lam and the concluding letter Ya of both these divine names here reads literally, for me, Li, a powerful reminder of the ultimate source and aim of that all-encompassing love. Visibly behind these two names in the foreground in red, that is the two names that are in the foreground in red bound pigment up above them, is a prayer likewise mirrored on the right and the left to another even more familiar divine name, Ya Akhir, oh, the ultimate, the omega, the aim and goal of all, the name that here appears above and beyond all else. Yet it is still intimately intertwined, or partially intertwined, with the two black names in the foreground. In that background plane, Ya Akhir is surmounted by an immense crown and interlaced images of the leaves, flowers, and fruits traditionally associated with paradise, Al-Jannah, closest to God, and the divine, glasses here, and and God is as the real Haq, the divine cosmic source of all life, Al-Hay. In fact, when you go into the shrine this time, you might more notice, but after these names, the first one is Al-Muta'ali, the one who's above all, then this, and then Al-Hay, right before you get to Rumi's tomb, and then after that, Al-Razak and Al-Wahhab, the one who bestows. So whoever did the existing artwork there, the existing calligraphy, had a whole spiritual journey in mind in the order of those names. Visibly behind those two names in the foreground, in red-brown pigment, is thus the overlaying of these two planes of different colors and calligraphy alike provide the viewer with a liminal boundary of mystery, suggesting the repeated Quranic insistence on the ways that every divine sign, ayat, in this world in our experience, as you know, al-afaq fi anfusihim, that every ayah points back to its source and meaning in that infinite, invisible beyond, what is behind the plane of the black letters here, on the way that the friends of God, the awliyaullah, the term that includes all the divine prophets and messengers, stand present just on the other side of that plane of the visible, immediately witnessing us in this world, or remaining mysterious and hidden to our everyday self. So now we're ready to explore the central mystery of this painting, the transforming ways the alif of the divine presence and unconditional creative love forms the axis or pivot, an essential connection, a sort of spiritual doorway around which these two infinite names and realities, Wali and Wali, are always revolving in every stage of each soul's turning return, its tawbah to God. First section, I'll summarize briefly here, it's a short one. The divine name reality, Al-Wali, the Awliyaullah, and the love relationship of Walaya. Constantly referring back to this extraordinary calligraphy from the Turbe, from Rumi Shrine, this brief exploration of the divine-human relationship, traditionally termed Walaya, is divided into the following 6 sections. A short introduction, which I will get to, on the key terms of Walaya and the divine name Al-Wali, a brief outline of a few of the most obvious ways or divine signs through which you all begin to become aware of the actual reality of this relationship. Third section, a short indication of the lifelong processes of realization, tahqiq, by which each person gradually begins to follow up on those initial discoveries, those initial divine gifts. Section 4, a simple spiritual phenomenology of some of the recurrent ways that this love relationship, which ultimately encompasses every area and dimension of our experience, begins to become deepened and more consciously interactive in our spiritual life. And 5, a few indications of the far-reaching practical and political implications of this unfolding process of discovery. And finally, I'll have to abridge it today, but a reminder, part 6, of the ultimate inseparability of these two names in the actual dynamic processes through which our awakening to God's Walaya, together with the Awliya and through the Awliya, is ultimately driven and conditioned by the divine power and influence of Wilaya, of God's governorship. The divine name that initially concerns us here is that of Al-Wali, with its substantive masdar form of Walaya, or Valayat in Persian and Turkish. This divine name reflects an immense complex of closely associated meanings, including to be close or next to be friends with, and by extension to aid, assist, help, protect, and support. Now, in this meaning of the divine name, Al-Wali in particular is related back simply to the vast range of Quranic verses and hadith dealing with this particular aspect of the proximity of the divine reality and its relationship to all of creation and to human beings more particularly. And when we add to those verses and hadith relating to the ones that relate to the practical realization and actualization of that divine-human relationship of Walaya, then there's no exaggeration to say that virtually all of the Quranic and prophetic teaching can be understood as centering around this reality of Walaya and its endless ramifications. So I'll just read the titles of the sections we have to skip over. Discovering the Gateways of Walaya, the Abwab al-Walaya, its perspectives and prospects. These aren't arguments. What I've tried to give in each case is the way Rumi does, is to give examples that touch the lives of every human being. It doesn't matter if you're a Marxist or a Daesh member, whatever, everyone is touched and has their own gateways to Wilaya. They're often not understood in religious terms, but that's one of the deeper problems that this paper is trying to tackle, of how we convey what were traditionally religious ideas and meanings and realities and foster them in a world in which more and more of the younger generation in any part in the world don't have these traditional vehicles that have been built up over the centuries for beginning to appreciate, visualize, and build upon our first gateways of Wilaya. Third section, exploring Wilaya, not discovering it, exploring it, making sense of the invisible. Third section after this, fourth, intimations of Wilaya, khasa'is al-Wilaya, recognizing and deepening the gifts of grace, the karamat, not the karamat of the awliya, but the karamat that our lives are constituted of. And fifth, some practical implications, communicating and sharing the relationship of Wilaya. If you think about those, they're all about moving from something where experience Wilaya is something that we just encounter, just happens to us, as we begin to process this, and over the decades we begin to practice and eventually come to share and communicate what we've learned. So, conclusion. From learning the true service to Ibadah, discovering the dance of Walaya and Wilaya. I noticed there was a very similar title up there. I don't know if someone else had planned to use this imagery of the dance, but it's a traditional one for this interplay between these divine names and realities. In the preceding sections, I've mainly focused, ones we didn't get to see today, I've mainly focused on the distinctive features and qualities of the relationship of Walaya, of our relationship to God as Al-Wali, and not so directly on the equally indispensable role of Wilaya, of God as Al-Wali, the ruler, the governor, all the details of all of creation. Because these aspects of God as friend, protector, guide, and so on are normally perceived much more positively, and because at the very early conscious stages of that relationship, we inevitably experience the first memorable occasions of that love story as unusual, if not indeed miraculous, events and happenings. But that is certainly not how these two divine qualities or names are presented in this extraordinary calligraphic monument from Rumi Shrine. For there, the vertical letter Alif, or again the Alif, usually symbolizing the divine creative act, an inner link of creator and all creation, is inextricably intertwined with the letter Lam, shared by both of these divine names, suggesting and even highlighting the ultimate inseparability of these paired divine names in the ongoing process of each soul's spiritual discovery, growth, and maturation. It really is, when you can see it, it's if you know revolving doors, it's like the Alif is like the Qutb, the axis, the pole around which both these names are constantly dancing. Indeed, if we return to examine more closely the different phenomenological dimensions of Walaya in the preceding sections, it quickly becomes apparent, at least as an abstract, logical observation and conclusion, that none of these individual facets of Walaya, of God's friendship and closeness, becomes apparent to us, manifest to us, without a complex, far-reaching, and all-encompassing framework of divine activity, governance, direction, and all the other manifestations of God as Al-Wali. Those are present and operative in every dimension of being, from the most metaphysical to the most intimately personal. Indeed, it is fair to say, in line with our opening verse from the Quran, that is the وَلِلَّهِ الْمَغْرِبِ الْمَشْرِقِ, keeping that, for the most part, we normally seek and discover some longed-for manifestation of the face of God, precisely as the eventual result of our turning around away from any of the multitudinous, dark, troubling, or disagreeable aspects of life. So from that perspective, the Alif of our calligraphy is like the axis or spiritual pivot of a kind of revolving door, where our initial encounters with the dark, fearful, uncontrollable, and unknown aspects of life keep us constantly in prayerful search and longing for the illuminating solace of Walaya. In short, our motivations, our capacities, our perceptions and interpretations, even the deeper determination of when our prayers and pleadings are outwardly answered, all of these inwardly visible aspects of Walaya are also ultimately expressions of and responses to the preceding forces of God's Walaya, of God's determination. Indeed, this initial unconscious opposition of divine walaya as something intrinsically positive and longed for, and of wilaya as an often apparently impersonal or even negative ruling power, or if I must say, judging by my students, they'll even come out and say it's evil, is quite typical. They say that before they take my classes, I should say. But people see the world as torn between good and evil, with the walaya on the side of good and wilaya on the side of the not so good. Is quite typical of the sort of deep-rooted instinctive human dualism which we normally apply quite unreflectively in the course of life to so many of the necessary polarities and contrasts between the contrasting divine names and qualities. For example, to God as Muhyi and Mumit, as Hadi and Mudil, as Zahir and Batin, and so forth. Of course, none of those divine attributes can exist and become humanly known and appreciated without each other. Yet in themselves, such an abstract philosophical or theological cautions have little deeper effect in transforming and overcoming that underlying natural human instinct to dualism. Instead, this calligraphy reminds us that in practice it is only through our close attention to life's actual realities and contexts, that is, to all the unfolding, totally personalized lessons and tests bestowed on each of us by that divine beloved, to borrow Rumi's favorite image for that face in this painting. It's only through all those actual tests and contexts that we can gradually learn something of the deeper reality and divine source underlying our unique moments of awakening to the divine friend. Or in other words, only through those dramas can we fully discover that the divine ruler, Al-Wali, actually is the all-compassionate beloved, Al-Wali, Yar, and Dost. Secondly, this painting boldly emphasizes, like so many of Rumi's poems, long and short, that is only in a state of profound humility, vulnerability, and often desperate longing and entreaty of niyaz, symbolized in this calligraphy by the prayerful O, the Ya, the appeal, always addressing this intertwined pair of divine names. It's only through that state that we can even notice and really appreciate the beloved's ultimate and eventual response. Finally, the fact that this initial passionate prayer extends all the way up to the ultimate reality, Ya Akhir, poignantly highlights the necessary vastness of the divine perspectives of time and possibility that are so slowly revealed through our transforming encounters with both of these names. I'm coming up to the end now. One of the defining qualities of any great work of spiritual art is that its meanings and immediate import shift with each renewed encounter, with each transforming visit to the graves at the Zurtum al-Maqabir. Thus, this mandala at each encounter actively mirrors back each viewer's deepening and necessarily unique personal experience of the divine governor, Wali, and the divine beloved, Wali. So with time, we pilgrim viewers gradually find ourselves more and more often passing beyond the bold surface plane to the mysterious space of the spiritual realms, the barzakh, behind the visible plane of the face and names. And from our repeated visits to that rediscovered presence of the divine beloved or friend, we might find some of the following signs. Very quickly. Painful difficulty, usr, becomes ease. As the Quran says, surely with the hardship, not after it, with the hardship, innama is ease. Surely with the hardship is ease. Innama ma'al usri yusra. Innama ma'al usri yusra. Our initial impression of divine necessity and determination as being opposed to our severely limited individual freedom, the opposition of Jabr and Qadr, becomes transformed into a partnered, spontaneous dance of taslim and reza, of inner surrender and peace. Our initial contrast of rare moments of miraculous grace, of karama, to an ordinary, vacant world, routine or even evil, oppression, tragedy, and the like, is gradually transmuted into our transforming, finding awareness, our wujud, of the whole of existence as blessing, barakah. The initial stages of calling upon God or others and then waiting for some eventual wished-for external response begin to give way to the deeper practice of spontaneously listening and responding spontaneously in that beautiful service, ihsan, which is the true act of worship, ibadah, and the culmination of faith is described in the famous hadith of Gabriel that at the to worship God as though you see him. And even if you don't, he sees you. Our initial contrast of singular, memorable, spiritually meaningful moments to the futilely repetitive horizontal landscape of a linear and impersonal time, Zaman, gradually dissolves into the experienced, timeless instant, waqt, in the language of the Sufis, the waqt, of the personal love relationship of Walaya. And finally, the familiar, painful juxtaposition of unexpected moments of grace experienced as effortless, unexpected music against the background of life's more persistent situations, a cacophony, a random noise, is gradually effaced someplace behind the face of this painting in our dawning awareness of the invisible rhythm, the intertwined cooperation of this deeper dance of Walaya and Walaya. As in the famous concluding lines of one of Yeats' last poems, echoing the beautiful Quranic image of that cosmic tree whose roots are in heaven and whose branches are in all the names on earth. Yeats says, "O chestnut tree, great-rooted blossomer, are you the leaf, the blossom, or the bowl? O body swayed to music, O brightening glance, how can we know the dancer from the dance?" And the pilgrim visitor moves on. Thank you. I always
Efendim muazzam bir konuşma tasavvuf.
That was an amazing speech, the essence of tasawwuf. When we define Kamil, İnsan-ı Kamil, the mature person, God says Allah is the person, is manifested in the person with his grace, and I am amazed and mesmerized by the greatness of the hakikas and the endless unity, the Vahdet-i Vücud, secretly engraved in a leaf, and the B with the letter L, and there is a movement, there is an endless unity being reflected with the name of Vali, the ordering one, and Veli acts and becomes a friend for us, becomes a guide to pull us back to his endless unity. It is the Lam Elif, that Lam Elif is so immersed into each other, intermingled, and this is Hazreti Muhammad. All the letters are secretly engraved in his being, and let God allow us to understand all of these. If God was left alone, which of us could feel this love? Thank God He has created us, He has given us the prophets, He has given us the velis, and we are able to understand this love. Let God not separate us from prophetic understanding, and let God make it possible for us to see the prophets. Thank you so much. God be with you. I would like to thank our Honorable Ms. Cemal Nur Sagut and all of our speakers and professors. We're more than happy to be able to share the richness of our hearts yet once again with a loud round of applause. We are grateful. And now we would like to ask you to present the token of appreciation, the gift of commemoration to Professor Dr. James Morris.
Çok teşekkür ediyoruz. Sağ olunuz.
Thank you so much.
Çok teşekkür ediyoruz efendim. Sağ olunuz.
Thank you so much.
Saygıdeğer konuklar, Uluslararası Mevlana Vakfı Almanya Başkanı Sayın Süleyman Wolfban Sempozyumun kapanış konuşması.
I would like to know, we were going to have Mr. Peter Kunz for the closing speech, but he's unfortunately not with us. And Miss Esin Çelebi Bayru shall give the closing speech of Mr. Kunz on his behalf. I would like to now ask her to the stage to deliver the closing speech.
Efendim aslında programımıza kapanış olarak getirmiş ama
we actually assessed it as a closure, but this is not a closure speech. Let me correct it as a note of gratitude, a thank you speech. He has started his speech with a thank you to the Çelebi family and everybody who made this organization possible. Thank you so much for inviting me. I was more than honored to be invited to this coinciding group of events. No matter how much we want, we won't be able to be there because it is what God wants that happens, not what one wants. And whatever God wants is the auspicious one. We shall obey God's will and we serve with God's will. And we are very happy to be at God's service. Please accept it. The two major prophets' birthdays are very close. In 11th of December, it is the birthday of God's prophet Muhammad, with whom came the revelations of God. And in the 24th of December, it's the birthday of Prophet Jesus. And right in between, 17th of December, is Sheb-i Arus, which is the anniversary of Hazreti Mevlana reaching his beloved. It is a very interesting connection, living and dying, death and birth and rebirth. Birth, death and rebirth. This love today is still felt in Konya. Happiness, love and closeness to God are felt not only in Konya, even in Almanya. Here we are preparing for Sheb-i Arus. On 16th of December it is a public ceremony, and on the 17th we will have the ceremonies in our own dargah. One will bring masses together for Sema and one is only for us. It is away from all the foreign and curious eyes, and this will be a tribute to the birthday of two prophets and the death of Hazreti Mevlana, birth and death. And how do we reach the deepest levels of lightness? Whenever the days are the darkest, the nature is silenced. The trees shed their leaves as if everything is in a deep sleep. It's all snow outside, but very soon, in the next weeks to come, we shall be aware of the new life coming. The days will be longer and the nights will be shorter. This shall be soon seen, and we're happy for that. With the birth of two prophets, the days became also lighter and warmer for the people. And Hazreti Mevlana's death brings us new life as well. They rejoice in a magnificent way. And it is ending with a very famous ghazal. If you see my coffin on my death day, don't think that I have the sorrow and despair of the world. Don't think that I'm despaired for leaving the world. Don't you be ever thinking that. When you see my funeral, don't think of it as a separation. It is not the time of separation for me. It's the time of rejoicing. When they put me in the ground, don't call it a grave, because it is my station for the world over there. You have seen the death, but see the birth as well. When the sun goes down and you can't see them anymore, or the moon, are they damaged at all? No. Even though you see it as a loss and disappearance, it is actually rebirth. Even though the grave looks like a dungeon and jail to a person, that is actually the place of salvation. Which seed has been planted and not grown? Which seed has not erected itself from the earth? And which bucket has been immersed to a well and didn't come up with water? Why would Joseph, Yusuf, would be crying? When you are done with this world, then your feelings are for the other world. With those feelings, I greet you with my deepest respects from Germany. Mr. Süleyman.
Hanımefendiye
çok teşekkür ediyoruz.
We are thankful to our Honorable Miss Esin Çelebi. It is a great spiritual blessing for us to have her here. Now I would like to invite Miss Emine Bağlar, the chairperson of TÜRKPAR, to deliver the token of appreciation to Miss Esin Çelebi Bayro.
daha güçlü bir alkış istirham edeceğim. Çok sağ olunuz efendim.
Thank you so much.
Ne kadar şanslı bir beyefendi değil mi efendim?
What a lucky gentleman I am, aren't I?
Değerli misafirler,
esteemed guests, this brings us to the end of our symposium. Love of Prophet in Mevlana, our program shall continue with the Tasawwuf concert of the La-Ikri Tasawwuf Music Group. Now we shall ask you to please evacuate the room since we need to get the room ready for the concert setting. Thank you so much for your understanding. Thank you so much for your participation and contributions. Hope to see you at 5:30 p.m. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day.